Ladies and gentlemen, gather around because today's story is one of those rare Zimbabwean tales that does not involve a minister caught with illicit gold, a councillor fighting for a seat they didn't win, or some mysterious investor promising a mega project that never materializes. Today, Zimbabwe remembers a man whose name was not built on scandal, greed, or political acrobatics, but on faith, sacrifice, and nationhood. Imagine that, a Zimbabwean hero who actually acted like one. The story of Mutumwa Mwazha of Africa is not just a chapter in our national history. It is a whole spiritual epic that begins where many of our heroes come from. Humble beginnings, honest work, and calling bigger than a man's ambition. While the politicians of today fight over chairs, titles, and who has the bigger convoy, Mutumwa Mwazha spent his life building a bridge between the spiritual and the national. And somehow, he managed to do it without demanding fuel coupons, tenders, or a diplomatic passport. During the Second Chimurenga, a time when supporting the liberation struggle came with a real chance of disappearing mysteriously, many people kept their heads down. But not Mutumwa Mwazha. While some businessmen were busy selling sugar for triple the price and importing biscuits for the Smiths regime, this man quietly turned his business into a lifeline for the freedom fighters. Food, clothing, shelter, things that seem basic until you remember that during war, giving a soldier a meal could easily earn you a visit from the Rhodesian security forces and not the friendly kind. He didn't stand in front of cameras bragging about it. He didn't wait for an award. He didn't ask for a farm. He simply did what needed to be done. In the darkness of war, he became a source of light and prayer, whispering courage into young men and women who had traded their youth for Zimbabwe's tomorrow. And unlike some who claim war credentials today, Mutumwa Mwazha did not suddenly develop liberation memories 40 years later when elections were near. His contribution is recorded in the ground, in the spirit, and in the very survival of those he sheltered. And it didn't end with him. His son, Dr. Masimba Mwazha, stepped into the battlefield not carrying a briefcase or a luxury watch, but medical supplies. While others ran from gunfire, he ran toward the wounded, treating guerrillas, saving lives, and fighting side by side with some of the liberation legends whose names are etched across history. Father and son, spirit and struggle, prayer and gunfire, a rare combination in a country where most families today are fighting over a WhatsApp group. Together, they became something Zimbabwe badly needed then and still needs now, an alliance grounded in faith, sacrifice, and a love for Zimbabwe that wasn't measured in political positions, allowances, or what one could extract from the state. Their effort wasn't a transaction. It wasn't help me now and I'll help you later. No, it was genuine patriotism, that type that did not require press conferences or staged photo shoots. And after the war, when Zimbabwe was a wounded nation trying to put the pieces back together, Mutumwa Mwazha stepped into his second calling, spiritual leadership. While politicians were fighting for positions in boardrooms, he was busy healing a traumatized people, reminding Zimbabwe that nationhood is not just built on guns and slogans, but on moral clarity, unity, and a spiritual compass that points somewhere other than the nearest offshore account. His teachings, a blend of African spirituality and Christian doctrine, did something our modern leaders consistently struggle to do. Unite people, inspire people, give them a reason to hope beyond survival and hustle. His ministry grew not through coercion, threats, or party buses ferrying crowds to rallies, but through faith. Pure, unmanufactured, unpoliticized faith. That alone makes him an anomaly in our national history. President Mnangagwa declared Paul Mwazha a national hero. So, when Zimbabwe declares Mutumwa Paul Mwazha a national hero, it is not a favor, not a political deal, not a strategic appeasement. It is a long overdue salute to a man whose footsteps shaped both physical and landscape of this country. A man who bridged the sacred and the secular without exploiting either. A man who stood firm when fear was the national language. A man who led by example when leadership was measured not by power but by purpose. And here's the irony that Zimbabweans know too well. In a nation overflowing with political noise, it takes a spiritual giant to remind us of what leadership should look like. Humility, service, sacrifice, conviction, faith. As the nation reflects on its legacy, Zimbabwe is confronted with a question it has been dodging for years. Where are the leaders who listen? Where are the leaders who serve? Where are the leaders whose callings are bigger than their pockets? Before his death, Paul Mwazha was offered a car by Wicknell Chivayo. He flatly refused the gift, but when his condition worsened and he couldn't talk, his son accepted the gift on his behalf. To the rest of the country, Paul Mwazha never accepted the gift. He is the second clergyman after Ezekiel Guti to be declared a national hero in Zimbabwe. Ladies and gentlemen, Zimbabwe has spent decades fighting its own leaders. Not because citizens are rebellious, but because those in power often choose convenience over conscience. The people speak, the leaders cover their ears. The people cry, the leaders celebrate. The people say we want change, and the government responds, no, you don't. You just think you do. If Mutumwa Mwazha's life teaches Zimbabwe anything, it is that leadership must listen. It must heal, it must unite, it must uplift. For once, this nation needs leaders who follow the people's will, not force their will on the people. Zimbabwe has honored a true hero. The challenge now is whether the living will learn from the example of the departed or ignore it the way they ignore every survey, every plea, every protest, every cry, and every prayer. His legacy now becomes Zimbabwe's mirror, and the reflection is uncomfortable, but necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Zimwaves TV. Please subscribe, share, and comment below.